tour down in Traverse City, and Jerry has a good story about Eric coming from Traverse City.
Oh, well, Eric, like I said, a red-tailed hawk, and my mentor Rebecca called me in August of 2 years ago and said, would you like a red-tailed hawk? And at that time we only had, I guess we just had Phoenix at that.
Yeah.
And red-tailed hawks are probably a dime a dozen. They're the most common hawk in Michigan. I could go on a Raptor Care blog and probably find several red tails out for placement because they can't be released at any given time. So I just said, nah, I'm going to wait for something more exotic than a red tail. And then Rebecca sent me a picture of Eric, and I fell in love. He's very distinctive looking even for a red tail, and he's just a beautiful bird. But you can see what his injury is. He's got a droopy wing, and he put something right through the wing. So he was brought into Rebecca's, and we know it was a hatch year bird because he was totally brown, no red tail yet. So he was only about 4 or 5 months old. And birds of that age are like teenage drivers. They're not very good. They don't know how to hunt very well. They're running into things, they're getting injured. So that's the time of year, August, September, when we probably get our most birds in, the young ones. And he had a particularly good personality too, so Rebecca predicted that he'd be a good program bird, and sure enough he is. The birds are just starting to molt right now. They all molt during the summer. And raptors, of course, have to fly every day. Some of the ducks and waterfowl will molt all at once, and in 2 weeks they lose their feathers. They can't fly, but they're eating on the ground, and then they get their feathers back. So for 2 weeks they can't fly, but they're in large flocks, and their protection from predation is just numbers. Whereas these guys have to fly and hunt every day. So they lose their feathers 1 or 2 at a time and have to grow them back in. And of course they're going to do that during the summer when the prey is the most abundant. So it's going to be the easiest hunting. And so we collect the feathers. I tell people that working with the birds, I've really come to appreciate how magical feathers are. I had never quite appreciated that until I read and studied and observed. I'm just going to slide behind your.
Raptors don't like people behind.
And I don't know how many of you know, but actually these are dinosaurs. And the paleontological evidence is now basically confirmed, and I think it's fully accepted, that birds are the remnants of the dinosaurs. And the only remnants, because all the other dinosaurs died out, went extinct. And the first dinosaurs to develop feathers did that long before they were flying. The first feathers had no flight function. So the question became, why would a dinosaur have feathers if it wasn't going to fly? Well, what do feathers do? They keep you warm, and that was the initial theory. But as the fossil evidence became more and more, and they filled in the gaps in the development of feathers, they now think that the primary function of feathers is display. And those that got them are more attractive to mates than those that don't. So one line of dinosaurs, eventually the feathers evolved to be more and more complex. And they started off with what the earliest feathers were, very similar to what we think of as down now, very simple structures, but display. And everybody likes them. The dinosaurs like them, they're pretty. Humans like them. And as you probably know, these birds are all protected by federal law. And the reason was, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, many species were going extinct because they were being hunted for their feathers. So that's why they're protected. And you cannot even have a protected bird feather in your possession unless you got a permit. Even if you find it in the woods, you got to leave it there. But then they developed into the intricate structures that we've got now. And eventually, some of these dinosaurs with feathers, they think, started running, to get away from prey, and they flapped their feathered front legs and started gliding and eventually flying. Now, it was such a successful evolutionary advantage that the ones with the feathers survived the extinction while all the rest of the dinosaurs died off. But think about the feathers. Okay, it's flight, it's warmth, it's display. Many species, especially owls, it's camouflage. And these down feathers, if they get wet, they're not going to do anything for heat. So they got to keep the down feathers, which are next to the skin, dry. And so feathers also are raincoats. They're waterproof. They do all that one function of feathers. And after reading all that and understanding all that, I wish I had. Show you one other thing here. It's kind of neat and kind of unique that we've got these. There aren't very many raptor centers that even have these. These are feathers that are emerging from the shaft. So they're just growing in as new feathers as molting. And normally, you don't get these in this state. They're called blood feathers because at this stage, the blood supply to the shaft of the feather is still there as the feather is growing. And then once the feather is fully grown, the blood supply shuts off. So if you pluck a feather, a mature feather, you don't get blood. But if you pluck a feather in this stage, it's going to be very bloody for the bird. And the reason we got these is because Eric has this injured wing, this droopy wing. The hole healed up, but there's ligament damage or no bone damage, but ligament or nerve damage. But because of that, he steps on his feathers. And so he stepped and pulled out a couple of his blood feathers from his wing. And so we found them and were able to use them in these lessons. Oh, by the way, these are Phoenix's bands that he was banded with. That's how we know his history. We got him when he was just over 1 year old, and we would have known that by his coloration, because he was just starting to molt into his adult, but it takes peregrines 2 to 3 years to molt into their adult plumage. But with the bands, we got the accurate story, and like Bob said, today. Okay.
Speaking of bands, at Energies, is that done by a federal wildlife raptor specialist?
Yeah, it's not. He's not an agency personnel. It's a guy named Greg Septon. He does all. He's a licensed bander.
Okay.
So I don't have a banding license. I can't band, but he can, and he does all of Energies nest boxes, peregrine boxes. So he goes around to all our plants. And he should be coming up here any day now to do these here. It's pretty amazing when you think about it, because these chicks, peregrine chicks, all the raptor chicks basically are born with nothing but pin feathers. Most of them are pretty close to blind, so the parents are coming up and just feeding them, putting food in their mouth. And typically the nest box here, Phoenix was born on May 11th, that's about typical. Right around May 10th they're going to be hatched. And it takes them only 8 to 10 weeks for those chicks to grow up into a fully sized bird and start molting into their adult flight feathers. So they're going to fledge, leave the nest, and start flying when they're only 10 weeks old. And that's why we say that they're like teenage drivers, just kind of bashing around. Usually the first flight will be from the nest box down to the ground. And that's what happened to the owlets at the nest here in Marquette at the cathedral. Their first flight was down to the ground about 10 days after we got their father in. We got called by the police and they said that, we've got these 2 owls down on the ground right by the courthouse, and we knew right away what it was. We said, well, that's when the chicks are leaving and that's where they're going to go. So we went there, and sure enough, and there was a big crowd of neighbors around it, and we just told them that it's normal. Normally it's going to happen in the woods usually, unless they're in town, which these were. And just keep dogs away, keep them safe, and let us know if they're still on the ground the next morning. The next morning they were up in the trees. So. And they're still there. I actually got a call today from someone from the neighborhood, And you may have heard about our reward. We're offering a reward for the information leading to the shooter. If it is a young person, I would hope I can work with the DNR to get them to just tell them to come out here and spend some time with the birds and learn to love the birds instead of shooting at them. But I got a call from someone from the neighborhood and said, well, he was probably shooting at the crows because, oh, can you hear that? They're still mobbing the owls. So we knew the owls were still there because the crows are still mobbing the owls. And I said, well, you can't shoot the crows. If crows and owls are natural enemies, they're going to interact that way. And this is Sage.
She came with that.
Yeah.
Is Sage the model of the painting?
No, that's a barred owl.
That's a barred owl we released up in Hancock about a year ago or so. No, this is Sage, and Sage came from our mentor in Traverse City. At the same time we got Eric. And Sage is about 20 years old. And she was found as a young owl wrapped up in barbed wire. So she probably ran in there trying to get some squirrel or mice that were on a farmer's land and got trapped in it. So the farmer cut the wire loose, but she was still wrapped up in it, took it to the vet. They sutured her up. She's had a lot of scar tissue on her ankles and stuff, so she gets arthritis in the wintertime. But she's also blind in her left eye. And so she was with Rebecca for over 10 years, closer to 15 years, and then we just got her 2 years ago. And so I figure she's about 20 years old. And she did a lot of education programs, taught a lot of kids about owls. And then she was retired because Rebecca got a younger male owl than that she uses now. But so she was retired for a few years, and then we got her and brought her up here. And the other great thing about Sage is she's a great foster mom. That down around Traverse City, it's a little more populated area. There's a lot of logging going on. Guys chop down trees, cut down trees. They find these chicks falling out of a nest, or the spring storms knock owlets out of the nest. And they would bring them to Rebecca, and she'd put them in with Sage, and she was a great foster mom. She'd feed them, teach them how to hunt, and then in the fall they could be released. So. But she's, as Jerry said, she weighs about 1,800 grams, 4 pounds, and little Phoenix eats more food than she does.
So I'm going to pass some owl feathers around. They all have to be returned to me, but I want you to take a close look. Because as I mentioned, these owls hunt by sound, not by sight. The hawks, the falcons have very good eyesight, 10 times better than ours. But the owls hunt by sound. They get very good sound. They have good eyes. They got a lot of rods in their eyes, or night vision, but they really hunt by sound. So to hunt by sound, you got to fly silently, because if the mouse hears you coming, you're not going to get him.
No, I can't see.
So if you look at the fringes of these owl feathers, you'll see that they almost look like they're afraid. And that's an adaptation that allows the owl to fly silently. And it can either perch up in a tree and swoop down silently, or it can fly silently, listen for the mouse to follow straight, whatever it is down there, and just swoop down and get it. And we saw a video of a study they did, and they had a hawk, and they had an owl, and they got them to fly a course with a very sensitive microphone in the middle. And the hawk went by, and it was something like 45 or 50 decibels, the sound just of his feathers as he flew. And the owl went by, and the microphone didn't register anything. It was completely silent. So that's what allows them, and you can also see that she's got feathers all the way down over her toes, and over around her beak. If you look at the snowy owl, this is our best trained bird. This is a snowy owl. They live in the Arctic and migrated down here to Marquette in the winter of 2012. By the time he got here, he was completely emaciated, had no muscle left, and so weak that he didn't even last 24 hours. And a friend of ours who's a taxidermist, when we told her we were going to use it for mounting, I called her to see what it would cost, and she said, well, don't eat my time if you use it for education. So snowy owls are amazing birds. They're much stronger flyers and fly greater distances than anybody knew. The last 2 winters we've had eruptions, they're called, massive migrations of snowies down into the United States out of Canada. No one knows quite why. The best theory is they're running out of their primary food, which are
Lemmings.
lemmings. Yes, thank you. Senior moment there. The lemmings, but it's not quite known for sure. And some of the birds that are coming south are very well nourished, so they don't seem to be starving like this one was. So it's, the other thing that's happening is you probably read climate change and global warming is affecting the Arctic much stronger than it is other cases. And so some of the tundra where the lemmings live is turning into brushland as the permafrost melts. And that, you know, the whole climate change thing could have an effect. Does that mean there's going to be more snowy owls or less? Again, no one knows. Not much is known because they live in the Arctic. They just don't study much. The last few years, they've been fitting them with radio collars. They actually went on a crowdsource and got enough money. These are about $4,000 a piece for these radio collars. We did 3 of them in the UP through crowdsourcing, people donating money. So now we're getting a lot more information about how much it costs. They used to think there were 500,000 to 600,000 snowy owls in the world. Latest now is 200,000 to 400,000, so there's a lot fewer of them than they thought. And I think the reason for the miscount earlier was they fly such great distances that they were counting the same bird several times.
But with the radio trackers, which when they're in range of a cell tower, they transmit all the data. So it's like the owls are making their own phone calls and reporting on them. But yeah, they're $4,000 a piece, and you can go online and check it out and see where every owl is.
So, you were talking earlier about how Peregrine, his wing was injured when he was juvenile. Do you know how often they are able to recover? I mean, like, obviously they're in the wild, you're not going to see them that often. So it seems to me that they would be able to recover from those injuries.
Well, but think about it. All of these birds make their living, get their food by flying.
Yeah.
So if you can't fly within 3 or 4 days, you're going to be starving to death.
But there are birds found with old injuries,
Yeah.
and not every injury is fatal. And sometimes they'll come in, and I think even one of our previous birds had a broken wing or something, and the vet saw and they're, oh, this other bone was broken before. You know, so you can see old wounds, but they weren't as dramatic as the one that brought them down was.
Most of the studies have shown that in the wild, for the raptors, approximately 50% of the birds will survive to 1 year. That's just the natural mortality in the wild.
Only when she wants to
Yeah,
show
only
you.
if she wants to show you.
But hers is pretty dramatic.
This was a great horn owl,
Huge.
right?
Huge wing.
Have you ever had any of the female birds actually lay any eggs?
Not here
Yeah.
yet, no.
Yeah, it is.
Golda lays eggs every year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Still.
And it's pretty funny. Rebecca has Doolin, who's a vulture. And Doolin was stolen from a nest when he was young, so he's imprinted on humans. He thinks he's a human. And he now thinks that Rebecca is his mate.
Oh.
So during mating season in the spring, he gets very protective and very solicitous of Rebecca. It's pretty funny to watch. Being courted by a vulture. But he's actually a very beautiful bird. When you get to know him, when I was doing my internship, I really got to interact with him a lot. He's curious. If you walk in, you untie your shoelaces on the first thing and then look at it.
Is there a scale of intelligence in the bird world? And I guess you'd have to rate it, you know, do they talk, do they reason, or do tricks or whatever?
There you go.
In the raptor world, is there a smarter raptor?
Yeah, I would say there is. There's a fascinating book called The Mind of a Raven by Berkheimer. He's studied ravens and corvids, ravens and crows, blue jays. He studied primarily ravens for decades now. Extremely intelligent. They actually have the ability to project, think ahead and solve problems like humans do. For a long time, that was definitive of human intelligence. No birds can do it. Some of the parrots can talk and are very intelligent also. I think the problem is, how do you measure intelligence? We measure it against our intelligence, not against theirs. So every bird, even a little chickadee, is very intelligent for what it needs to know to survive. Beyond that, probably not so much.
Heck with algebra.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can see her beak is a little long right now, so we're gonna have to poke that pretty soon. I don't know if Jerry told you, periodically we have to file down their beak, we have to trim their talons. It takes two of us.
Like dogs to go get out on the pavement.
It's a lot harder than it sounds. Well, Jerry restrains it. We have a technique to pull it down, and she doesn't like it very much. And then
Does she make noise when you do it?
some of our birds do. She makes a funny little trill.
Yeah, she kind of whinnies.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do they do that? Do their own beak and stuff?
Just in the wild, it's going to be a lot more wear and tear than it does in captivity. So we just got to watch it. Some birds, we try to have some hard surfaces because they'll clean their beak after they eat. Okay. That'll wear it down. But you will see it start to get long and hooked. You got to go in and grind it with a drummer. It's pretty funny. I'll hold her down. She's probably the hardest just because she's so strong.
She's pretty strong.
But I'll hold her down, and Bob's on the head. And to immobilize her beak, he's got to wait until she reach around with his thumb, and then when she opens her mouth to bite him, he sticks his thumb in her mouth to hold her mouth open, and then uses his other hand to drum it. Bear thumb.
Bear thumb?
Bear thumb.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, how long does she live, you think? It's just like
She could go to 30, 35 years for a great horn. Again, in the wild, probably half that, but they're very long. She's in very good condition. She gets a little arthritis in the winter.
It's amazing to see them this close, and really, because I know that they can turn their head quite far, to see just how far around
Yeah.
their head without moving their body.
Yeah, that's quite more pliable than we are, but they have a special structure in there that allows it to turn and not cut off the blood supply to the head. But almost every class we go to, one of the kids asks that. If you think about it, watch her eyes. Any of the bird eyes, they can't move their eyes like we can. If we hold our head here, we can move our finger around and fall. They can't do that. And it's speculated that's a weight-saving measure for the birds, because their eyes are large. They would be very heavy if they had muscles that were able to control that. With their head sticking straight out, they have to have perfect weight and balance. Whoop. There we go.
Did you mention that? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Did you mention that she was a foster mom?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But when you consider it, so they can turn their head at about 270-degree range, and we can go about 180. But with our eye movement, we probably have about the same range of peripheral vision, by looking around like that. But yeah, it's much more flexible than ours. And you figure, we have a skull of a great horned owl, or snowy owl. And when you see that, you see how big their head is with all the feathers. This skull is only about that big. And a third of that skull are eyeballs. About a third of it. They're just paper thin. Paper thin. It's
Is
incredible.
it true that most of the hunting's at night?
These guys will hunt during the day and night. Most of the other owls are nighttime. Well, not this guy. You'd have to wait a long time to eat 6 months of daylight. But most of them will hunt during the day as well.
Occasionally. I mean, their primary time when they're going to have the biggest advantage is at night, because they can see and hear better than their prey. Contrast that to the diurnal hawks and falcons, which their eyesight is their big advantage in their speed and power of flying. These are very slow flyers, but they're silent, stealth. And then the hawks, falcons are fast and strong flyers, good eyes. Different techniques.
Do they all have the yellowish sclera?
No. The Well, the falcons have dark eyes, so each species is different.
You know, oftentimes comments about ostrich, you know, the size of their brain is quite small compared to, you know, to their body. Are these birds that have large brains? I mean, comparatively speaking, is that?
Don't know.
Little lobes.
Haven't read any on that.
Yeah, don't know.
We live down in Georgia, and we have, there's an owl that we always hear in the daytime in our neighborhood. It's just a
A
barn.
barn owl.
Yeah, and we're always like wondering if, you know, if that's a sign that the bird is somehow sick or something because we're hearing it during the day.
No, you can hear bird owls frequently in the woods here. And I think they're more diurnal than probably the great horned, and then it just depends on the species. Some of them are almost exclusively nighttime. This little saw-whet owl, the northern saw-whet owl, is almost exclusively nighttime. But the barred owl, I hear them frequently in the woods when I'm out there.
They probably all have different vocalizations.
Well, they do. The barred owl is very distinctive. It's the who cooks for you.
Yeah.
And these guys are very similar hoot, but it's four or five hoots.
Just
And
a
then-
slight variation.
It's amazing the number of vocalizations they have because they'll screech at times.
What she's looking at. Thinks the snowy's gonna get it.
So they do have, but they've got their characteristics.
It was funny, we learned from another educator we listened to one time, Bart, and he says, if you're going out to watch for owls, don't start with the great horned owl call, because it'll scare every other owl away. Start with the little guys and work on it. I guess that makes sense.
Is this the top of the owl food chain?
It's
Top.
pretty much the top of the predator food chain. They're called flying tigers. They're fierce. They're fearless. They're probably the only enemy that she's got is another great horned owl. Yeah. Well, the eagles, I mean, and again, the eagles are going to be daytime. She's going to be hiding during the day primarily, so they're not going to find her. I mean, an eagle could take her. Yeah.
Do we have many of these types?
Oh yeah, they're common around here. These and the barred owls are very common. You can hear them most fall evenings. That's when the mating is usually done in the fall, because they're the first chicks that are born in the spring, and you'll see them in cameras with snow all around them. So they hatch very early.
Yeah, they're the earliest nesting birds, and they'll actually start nesting, lay eggs in February in the UP. So they're hatching by April, early April, compared to the falcon is in the middle of May.
They're cavity nesters?
The owls? The great horned is too big to be a cavity nester, so they'll use old nests, old crow's nests, old hawk nests, and I've even seen great horned nests that are just in a tree where you've got three branches coming together and there's kind of a hollow there. A place like that, any flat place up in a tree that's relatively safe.
So just, is the presence of these birds, does your chipmunk population stay pretty low around here, or how does that work?
Our birds don't get the chipmunks.
Do the chipmunks stay away?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
No.
Probably the dog and the cat. More significant than the birds.
So what do you do if, you know, if someone were to find an injured bird? What would you do?
Okay, we're one of only a few bird rehabbers in the UP. There's a few other ones. All of Central Dispatch, all the vets, the DNR, all have our number. So if you were to call Central Dispatch 911, which happens frequently, if there's a bird down in my yard, they'll give you my number. So we'll call and we'll try to talk you through it. A lot of birds run into windows and they're knocked out and stunned. Most of those will recover. Just put it in a safe place. Sometimes it'll take 24 hours, but eventually they recover and fly off. We brought several in here. We exam, can't find anything wrong, they just can't fly, and then the next morning you come out and they're anxious to go.
We did get a call about an eagle last week
Yeah,
on Ridge Street.
on Ridge Street.
So we went down to Ridge Street, and there was a seagull.
That's easy up at weekend.
Well, you know.
You may be out for something.
Very exciting when she described it.
Okay, well that's basically, yeah.
You do anything special for exercise, Jordan?
Not really. You know, with the free lofted birds, they're getting exercise. You can see him flying back and forth. Here, Phoenix is the same way. He's well, both of these birds are real chow hounds. All three of them except for her. And she's a chow hound, but she tends to wait until dusk to eat. But when Phoenix sees me coming with the food, he gets excited, starts flapping his wings, and just gets excited. Eric, sometimes you put the food on his bench there, and before I even get, sometimes I've had, jerk my hand away because he's down on it.
Do they like to perch to sleep, or do they go
Yeah.
in those little boxes?
Well, both, all of them will hang out on the perch. And I see Phoenix is up on a flat perch, and the peregrines don't perch much in trees. They do, but they use flat spaces more than anything. They don't build a nest. They nest on a flat part of a cliff. It's called a scrape. And so we try to mimic their, in their mew, the type of things that they would use in the wild. So you see all his surfaces are pretty much flat. We've got all these rough surfaces. The astroturf, or that kind of massages their feet, keeps their feet in good shape. And for him, these two, well, these three now, in the winter we'll have heated perches for them, because otherwise they'd be subject to frostbite, just like humans are.
Do you have any other protection? Do you put visqueen over
Yeah,
them?
we do. We wrap all the cages. We have heaters in the cages that need them,
They can't migrate.
because they can't migrate. No.
How many birds do you have in rehab, and what's your capacity?
Well, we've had, I think, 4 in rehab at a time is the most, and that's pretty much we're moving all day when you've got that many. We've got the 4 resident birds. Our capital project this summer is to build a rehab cage, a flight cage, next to that one. You notice the windows between here. You can take those panels out, because if we've got a rehab bird, we have to assess his flight capability and exercises before we release him. So we take the window out, and that makes for a double cage for flight. But we want to build just a dedicated flight cages.
Right now, you just have that.
Just the
male
one at
owl.
home. Right.
It's quite a story in the paper.
Yeah.
Get some donation.
I had someone call today and say they wanted to donate to increase the reward amount.
Were you one of the guys that were walking out there to put food out for the owlets?
That was him.
Oh, that
I
was
would have
me.
never made it out there.
Only did it once.
What's his prognosis?
It's really hard to tell. The bone should knit. We're going to take him in for a follow-up x-ray at the end of this coming week. If the bone knits okay, it just depends on how straight it knits, whether he'll be able to fly adequately or not. If he can't fly, we'll try to place him at an educational center. And I've actually gotten a couple of suggestions on one centers that might be interested in him, so hopefully we can find that. If we can't place him, then he'd have to be euthanized. By rule, if you can't release him or transfer him to a licensed facility, you have to euthanize.
Who's covering the veterinary expenses?
The vets are great. Win Sawyer donates all of their time, and any expenses, any materials, x-rays, that kind of thing, they give it to us at cost. So, like I said, we are a 501c3. We do live on, the birds live on donations. So, encourage you to donate if you can. And then we do have some brochures, if you didn't see it coming in, caps,
Note cards.
tattoos, note cards.
Kids love the tattoos. They're only temporary, Mom and
All of
Dad.
them are marked up about 30 to 40%. and that all goes into the
It's a bird. Get it mounted, put it in school or something, or what happened?
Yeah, well, this is the only one we've had mounted so far, but Nicole said she'd be interested in mounting another one. So yeah, we'd look for schools can have them, educational facilities.
Right.
Moosewood, for example, would be another good place. Museums need education. Powell Township has a beautiful snowy owl mountain. Swings for it.
Now, if the injured owl gets better and he can fly, where would you release him? That's where you got him from?
Right where we got them from. Because they have their home territory. These owls are not, they don't migrate. They stay in the same area. Barred owls, same thing. They're gonna know that home territory. Said from that phone call today, his mate and owlets are still out there because the crows are still around harassing them. So that's a good sign that they're still there. I took that as a good sign that they're probably doing fine. So yeah, we want to release it as close to home territory as we can. The one we released up in Hancock, the barred owl that Susan painted the picture of, somebody found it, transported it down here, was hit by a car. We rehabbed it and we drove all the way back up to Hancock and released it within a few yards of where they found it. So. Okay, well thank you all for coming.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome to hang out, look at the birds, and
Look at the birds before we go.